average version of Flex. Flex is a protocol originally thought by Sergio. We developed this together. It's part of a family of BitBMX protocols. Flex tries to solve a particular problem, which is how to optimize the use of bonds in this kind of protocols that we've been discussing, these off-chain protocols. How can we reduce the impact of these security bonds? And we are going to be thinking about breaching as a very the easy use case. And we are going to be assuming that we have really good garbled circuit solutions to implement all of the verifications that we need to implement. And we are going to assume that that is already solved. And we are going to be focusing on how to improve the rest of the environment associated to these protocols. So why are we using security bonds? We are using security bonds because we need those bonds in order to keep all of the involved parties honest. There's also the need to make sure that you cannot be target to and make you lose money in protocol fees and other stuff. So the bad party, the dishonest party must reimburse the winning party in these protocols. And most of these systems will fail if you don't have a security bond to support and to properly align the incentives. Besides the actual money, what is the problem of having security bonds in general? What's the cost associated with using these bonds? The cost is really, in a sense, the opportunity cost. It's not just about the money, but it's money sitting there. And what's the actual cost of having the money sitting there? The cost is the opportunity cost. I could have been doing something else with this money at that point. So in a sense, it's obvious that when you're thinking about the money sitting there as a lost investment, we know that investment growth has return. Returns, the yield is proportional. It's exponential on the time the investment is placed, because we have a compound interest, right? So if you put some money, it gives an interest, and that is reinvest. It's not simply put the money and forget about it. It's really what can I be doing with this money here. And the other thing is that what I can do with these bitcoins that we'll be placing as security bonds in the future, when we have more DeFi protocols, we will have more yield. So we will expect to have even higher yield rates in the future. So the actual cost of the security bonds is going to only to increase. But we cannot simply forget about the security bonds. We need to use them. And right now, most of the protocols use static bonds because it's easier to use static bonds. It's like the obvious solution when you're trying to pre-sign a lot of transactions and you need to connect the security bonds so they are used to pay to the winning party. You need to know, in principle, it looks like you need to know where are these funds coming from. So you need the money sitting there. So it's going to be available at the time of paying the winning party. So it's really complicated. It's really the obvious solution is not good enough. Has a lot of costs. So we are trying to achieve something better, and that better thing is try to have bonds that are placed a deposit at the time of the challenge instead of waiting for the whole life cycle of the protocol in Bitcoin. So this means that we are going to be paying for the challenge with UTXOs, which we don't know what was their ID at the time of setting up the protocol, this is going to be needed to be able to pay needs to be paid by both the operator and the watchtowers, or the provers and the verifiers, and we need to be able to pay the provers and the verifiers. And this is not, it was not an obvious, didn't have an obvious solution. So what we're going to do is have, again, Alice and Bob, a prover and verifier. I'm going to describe this as a two-party protocol, but the idea is that we can have different instances of flex among different parties, so we can have several of these instances in order to have multi-party version. So the joke, I will say, in this case is that if having one garbage circuit is better, then having two must be really, really better. So what we're going to be doing is using two garbage circuits instead of one. And we are going to be using these two garbage circuits to manage the security deposits and to use those two garbage circuits to make sure that the right party gets paid and gets reimbursed at the right time. And the way that this is going to work is that Alice is going to create one of these garbage circuits and give it the encryption tables that we discussed before to Bob. Bob is going to create a similar circuit, and it's going to give the encryption tables to Alice. So this is like a symmetric thing. All of the protocol is symmetric for both parties. And at some point, Alice is the prover, is the one that's going to start and do it. This is time for me to get I'm going to withdraw the funds. So at that point, Alice puts the deposit and provides the inputs to the A garbage circuit, to the first garbage circuit. And Bob sees her inputs and puts a similar input value to his version of GCB, the version of the garbage circuit for Bob. And what's going to happen at that point is that since this is the same circuit, then both of the circuits are going to give true, or both of the circuits are going to give false. And the idea is that if this gives false, then this is going to publish a secret that Bob will be able to use. And if both circuits gives true, then Alice will be able to use this secret in order to do something in the future. And the way that this protocol works then is that we have this transaction. We have one of these transactions for each Alice and Bob. And the idea is that we have this connector that is pre-signed, but with a SIG hash anyone can pay. So this is pre-signed. And here comes either Alice or Bob, depending on which deposit transaction this is. And it's going to be funding this transaction, which has a predefined output with a known script in advance. And the idea is this script has three conditions that can be used to pay. There is a condition to pay to Alice if Alice knows pay PA, which is the secret that means that Bob was wrong, or Bob can get this showing his secret, his signature and PB. That means that Alice was wrong. Or if there is a timeout, that means that the other party did not show his or her inputs in time, then there is a timeout, and whoever was the one depositing the funds gets the money back. And this is the basic building block that we use. As I said before, we have both parties creating these circuits and creating the inputs and sharing the garbage materials. They sign the transaction graph. And then Alice initiates the payout, puts her security deposit and the input labels. Bob needs to put his security deposit and the corresponding input labels. He's repeating Alice's input here. So the input labels correspond to each other. And if everything is correct, if both parties put their input labels, then one of the two parties is going to be able to collect both deposits and also the destination of the original UTXO that was protected with this system. And if one of the parties fails to put their deposit, the other one can proceed and collect and recover his or her deposit at that time. That is the basic building block for Flex. When you take a look at how all of these get together in order to implement the whole protocol, we have this. This is the full protocol graph where we have this deposit, Alice deposit transaction and Bob deposit transaction. This is the symmetric building block that I mentioned before, where we have the three possible outputs, ways to consume this output for this deposit, and the three to be able to consume this deposit for Bob's deposit. And depending on the execution of the protocol, the original Pegin UTXO is either transferred to Alice or stays there, and it's unaffected if Bob can stop Alice from getting it because Alice inputs were incorrect. So this is his basic building block for Flex, the 10-minute version. I think I'm mostly on time. We will try to use this as a building block in the follow-up presentation from Sergio.
I want to say something here because
Sure.
it's very important. These three transactions, obviously the transaction ID of this deposit is not known at setup time. So these are just transactions that can be created later, because there is a taproot here with the three potential ways of spending this. But these are not pre-signed. These are not pre-computed or stored. So the whole thing is just dynamic here. What is static is all the transactions marked as pre. These are pre-computed, right? But these are not. And that's the interesting thing. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to use this. Sí, ahora pongo. So the idea now is to use this as a building block to build much more complex and much more interesting things. Yes, here, give me 1 minute. For Bitcoin. ¿Me das el... Ah, perfecto, listo, ahí está. No sé por qué no quiso, la agarró y no agarró más. ¿No?
Tienes que clicar acá.
Ah, acá.
Sí, ahí. Y poner que querés.
Star Mirror, no, ahí está.
Sí,
¿Listo? Slideshow. A ver. Toma up. Change. Pongo change.
acá Windows.
No,
bueno.
Mirror screen.
Sí, sí.
Tendría que tomarlo, pero lo toma y después se va. No sé por qué. A ver. Ahí no lo tomó. Ahí va. Sí, no le gustó que estuviese del mismo lado el consumo. Se ve que no. A ver ahora. Okay. So what is battle for Bitcoin? So one of the problems that we face when we were designing bridges is, okay, now we can create a bridge with a set of, let's say, 10 operators. Most of the L2s that are currently being developed are thinking about having between 10 and 20 operators because it's very hard to get these operators to lock funds because they have to lock a lot of funds. So it's hard. But we were going further. We want to create Bitcoin decentralized DAOs that have, let's say, 1,000 operators, right? So we want to go further. And these security deposits are really problematic. So Flex was the first building block to be able to dynamically put money, but not in front, not front. So this is the agenda. I'm going to be very quick, but the idea is that by the end of this talk, you get an idea of how we can build a protocol having 1,000 operators. Okay, so this is the very old problem. So blockchains don't scale. There is a scalability trilemma that says decentralization, security, and throughput is hard to do together. But we have these magic things that are called L2s. And the L2s need to be bridged with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin does not have this capability, this functional escape velocity to support bridges. But until 2023, where we have now BitVM that gives you a glimpse of, how can we do these decentralized bridges. But The problem is that to build a robust, I would say, a sound breach, we need counterproofs. That's the only way that we can really make sure that you cannot create a fake withdrawal proof. And all the designs that involve counterproofs have a problem where they need security deposits that are proportional to the number of validators or operators, and they have these huge DAGs that generally are very expensive. So let's try to see what is the problem. So let's take a design of a breach that uses counterproof. This is a very schematic thing of how this breach could work. So we have a deposit transaction. We have a point where an operator can request a payout. Basically, either he's fronting the funds and want to be reimbursed or some other method. And then we want to have different watchtowers that can challenge that and provide a counterproof. And as you see, we need, if we want to be able to, each one of these watchtowers to provide a counterproof, what we have is many of these that can simultaneously challenge a single operator. So if we have 10, there is no problem because even if we are not using Flex, it's only 10 times the security deposit, not very bad. But if you have 1,000, then you don't want to put 1,000 times the security deposit to be able to fight each one of them. So for 10 it's okay. If you have 1,000, then all can come together and kind of they attack the operator, create a denial of service attack, a cyber attack on the operator. So even if we don't have a breach with counterproofs, let's say this is a BitBM2 breach, where basically there is only one path for challenging and only one, anyone can challenge. This is the BitBM2 way of doing things. You still have a problem where, let's say now that the number of operators start growing and you, as a watchtower, cannot challenge all the operators trying to steal the money simultaneously on different payouts. So even if you have a BitBM2 breach, you still have the problem that you cannot grow arbitrarily the number of watchtowers, okay? And especially in the case of BitBM2 breach, where challenging is so expensive, you won't be able to, fight against 1,000 operators because you will need 1,000 times 20 grants. So nobody's going to provide the money. Some of these operators are going to win, even if they are malicious. So we identify two problems, very simple. Either the operator is overwhelmed by a number of watchtowers that are challenging him simultaneously, so he cannot fight against 1,000 watchtowers, 1,000 challenges, or we have the opposite. We have a watchtower that is has to challenge 1,000 operators at the same time, and he's unable to. So how can we solve the problem? So first, I'm going to give you a brief of how this theoretically could be solved, and then we are going to implement this on Bitcoin. I think that the hardest part is not how theoretically this could be solved, but how to implement that on Bitcoin. Like theoretically, it's not so hard, okay? So first we identify what is the problem we're trying to solve, because this problem also appears in other contexts. For instance, in the context of rollups, they have to prove that they can withdraw funds from the rollup. So in optimistic rollups, you have the same problem. So we identify a setting that is common to all these applications. Basically, there are two roles, the asserters and the challengers. The asserters will claim some assertions, for instance, that there is a payout, etc. The challenge wants to disprove these assertions, these claims, and in the case of rollups, there can also be child assertions, like you want to be able to overlap these different states of the rollups, like very quickly, new states. So generally, there are also child assertions. And assertions can be in conflict. At any point in time, there can be two operators claiming that there is two different withdrawals. So Alice could be claiming, okay, there is a withdrawal of 10 BTC to Carol pending with certain sequence number. Please reimburse that to me. And then Bob is claiming again for a completely different withdrawal. So the watchtowers need to be able to fight against two simultaneously claiming operators, claiming two different things. And so if you think about that, this is the problem of multiple operators. And in case that the two operators are claiming something for the same sequence number, for the same state, then only one of these can be correct. Either the layer 2 is commanding Alice to pay Alice or to pay Bob, but not both. So the basic setup that is common to all these protocols is that you have assertions with certain sequence numbers that generally, each sequence number depends on the previous one. You have conflicting assertions, which means that two operators claim a withdrawal for the same state, but different things. And you have challenges that can challenge anything, okay? And so what is the cost of participation in this protocol? There are two costs. First, staking, like the security bonds. Then you have the gas cost. And then you have the computation or off-chain cost, essentially during setup. And you have to to make sure that all the three costs stay bounded. If I want to be able to fight against 1,000, then, neither the gas, nor the security bonds, nor the off-chain computation should grow more than, certain manageable practical parameters, okay? So where these solutions appear, how these protocols can be solved? Well, there are many solutions, specifically for Ethereum rollups: Optimism, Arbitrum Classic, PRT, Ball, Dave, and now Battle. These are different solutions to the same problem with different trade-offs, okay? So there is, when people think about optimistic protocols, they generally think about, the worst problem that can happen to you in optimistic protocol is the verifier's dilemma. What's the verifier's dilemma? The verifier's dilemma is, okay, I have a protocol that allows anyone to challenge, so it seems to be secure, but since it's secure, nobody challenges, because even if you are going to pay the challengers, but since the protocol is secure, nobody's paying attention to challenge anything. After some time, nobody's watching anything because there is no money to be made. So this seems to be a problem, okay? Well, that happened until they found a very bad problem that is much worse than the verifier dilemma. So this is a joke that was in Twitter some time ago. So, okay, so hey, you need an honest majority assumption, okay? So it seems like the best possible problem is the verifier's dilemma. Well, there is a much worse problem, which resource exhaustion attacks. That means being overwhelmed by challenges or overwhelmed by operators, okay? Okay, so this brings this, when they realized, and this was only a couple of years ago, that there was a much worse problem than the verifier's dilemma, they say, okay, there is a new kind of fraud-proof trilemma. And they say, okay, it's difficult to get efficiency, soundness, and liveness together. Like, I want to be able to exit from a rollup very fast, then I must fight against many potential challenges during the same period. So there are conflicting requirements there, okay? So I'm not going to go because of time, but essentially, if we try to optimize one, then the other gets worse. For instance, you want to have more decentralization, as Dave and Optimism try, then you have to wait a lot of time for exit, for disputes, even unbounded amount of time maybe. And Battle sits very good in the middle of all this. Battle is a protocol that really optimizes the three things. Okay, so now the theoretical protocol of Battle. First, what are the properties we get? We get the end dispute in problem solved in log n time. Like, this is very good because even if we have 1,000 parties, we get it. We solved it in 10 challenge periods. Very good. Requires a constant amount of capital, so I can fight everyone with just one security bond. And the security bonds are only required on dispute, and we will use Flex for that. And there is no number bounded operator. We can put, theoretically, there is no limitation. So how it works? It's kind of simple. It has two phases. In the phase, let's say you have a lot of operators, hundreds of operators claiming different things. So in the first phase, what you do is you make them fight against each other. So let's say here I have 4 operators, so I create a schedule, like a tournament, okay? So that I make them fight against each other. This is not new. There are other protocols that do tournaments on blockchain. So this is not new. But the idea of the two phases is new. So first, in the first phase, when the asserter 1 is fighting the asserter 2, basically one takes the role of the asserter and the other will challenge. So the ones in yellow take the role of challengers. And so because these are in conflict, only one can win.
until you get just one winner, just one assertion. And then all the challengers come now, they register to challenge if they think that this winning assertion is wrong. So they come and they challenge it. So they have to challenge only one. And we solve one of the problems. Like they don't need to challenge every single assertion. They will just challenge one because operators can fight against each other. Okay? So the good thing. And the other interesting thing is we also create a tournament for challenges where the challengers will not challenge all together, but they will challenge in rounds. And in each round, more challenge will come and add to the same tournament. And that will give us the possibility for this winner, this operator, if he's right, if his assertion is correct, to fight against each other, all the others. Why? Because each time he wins a battle, he will get immediate reimbursement, immediate reward, and that reward will allow him to fight 2 battles. And then with the rewards, he will fight 4 battles, and more and more and more. Okay? So this is the process. We have a registration, we have the phase 1, and then the phase 2. So I'm going to skip these. These are the math behind it because don't have much time. But essentially, what happens with your wallet, let's say you are an operator, is that you start with this amount of minimal initial capital, which is a single one, a number of security bonds that we will see. We will generally you put a minimum persistent security bond, like all the bridges require at least some amount of persistent security bond to allow you to pay, to reimburse fees, but yeah, maybe you don't need that. Then you start the round 1, and after you end the round 1, you get the reward, and the reward will allow you to reinvest in the following rounds. Now you will fight 2, and so on and so on. So you get, at the end of the game, you get everything plus some extra reward that you might get. Okay? So this is the simplest scheme that you can use. You start with 3 units of the minimal initial, this is big, right? Yeah, minimal initial capital. And as you see, if the dispute, the reward is 2 units, what you get is after the first fight, you get 1 unit of initial capital, then you get another unit, and at this point, after you fight 3, you have enough funds to start 2 fights in parallel. You fight 3 in each, and then you can start 4, and so on, and so on. So this is a way that you can expand the number of fights. You can do better, like choosing different initial parameters, a little bit of more initial capital, you can do it in 2. And you can do it in just 1, making some asymmetric deposits, like the challenger will deposit the double of the operator. Then basically what you win in 1 round, you can invest and try to fight 2 rounds. Okay? So this would be the easiest way. Okay, so how do we do this in Bitcoin? So what we want, the properties, and this is the interesting part, when we do this in Bitcoin, we have the 3 properties that I mentioned before. These are the same. But then because we have to create a transaction graph, we have this property that each party needs to perform n² number of signatures. Okay, that puts a limit on the number of operators that we didn't have in the abstract version. Like if we implement it in Ethereum, we don't have any cap, but in Bitcoin we need, because we need to pre-sign n² things. But the interesting thing is that even if you pre-sign n² things, that's only one part of the whole transaction DAG. So you don't have to sign the whole DAG. There are parts of this transaction DAG that are peer-to-peer parts. They don't require covenants for anyone. They just need 2 parties to sign. So each party will sign only n² and will store only n², but the whole graph is n to the cube. Okay, and that's a good thing. So the cost will be dominated by the circuit size, because that grows. This will be, I think, the main limitation when we make this practical. But I see it perfectly working for 1,000 operators. I don't see why it cannot work. I made some of the envelope computation. I think it could work perfectly for a terabyte of space and for 1,000 operators. because there are some circuits that you don't need to create one for each peg out, because just one for each pair of operators. Okay, so what we need, the pieces that we need is, first we need what I call a tournament chain, which a tournament chain is just a chain that allows you to create these tournaments, the phase one tournaments, at a certain piece. Clearly, you cannot support anything, I mean, all the challenges, or sorry, all the assertions to happen at the same time. For all the pegouts, that let's say you have a 10,000 pegouts of a certain 10,000 UTXOs of a certain chain, and then for each one of these pegout, you can have all the operators claiming something. So you don't want that to happen. Multiply the number of UTXOs by the number of operators. So you basically rate limit them. So you create this tournament chain, which allows you to do one tournament every one time log. You put the number of what you want here. It can be 1 day or 1 week, whatever. So in this tournament, there can be any number of claims. So in phase one, what you do is essentially the same as I mentioned before. What really can happen is that some of these asserters can be absent. In this case, the other party just wins the round. For instance, here there is no winner. Here this wins because the other party is not present, but finally you get one. Even if you have some parties that are not present, it doesn't change anything. In the phase one, how it looks in practice is like you have outputs of a single transaction where you let participants register, so they have to actively do something, propose a transaction, and then you will have a lot of, I will call them wires or whatever, that I call selectors. And these selector wires allow only one of these parties can consume the selector. And I will show you how. So for instance, in this flex instance, which is basically a dispute between A and B, Alice and Bob, only Alice and Bob will be able, one of them will be able to take this selector, to consume it. And in this case, between Carol and Dave, only one of them will consume the CD selector, okay? So that's the whole idea. So that it's the exclusive right to pass to the next round. So this is how it is organized. So for each one of the participants, I'm going to move here, you have something called an enabled chain, which has many rounds for the different rounds of the phase one protocol. And each link of the chain is connected to the other with a certain time lock. And in the middle, let's say Alice wants to fight with Bob, there is a flex component, which Futo mentioned before. This is a copy of the flex component. So after the flex component executes, one of the parties will be unable to move forward because the next enabled line will be consumed. The party who loses gets the next enabled line to be consumed. So only one of the two parties is going to make to the next round. Okay? So how we make sure that only one, and because they could collude, right? These two parties that we think that they are adversaries, maybe they are colluding and they want to pass both to the next line. So they don't execute this protocol. Remember that we wanted the flex component to be peer-to-peer, to be just between two parties, because we don't want this to be signed by everyone. If we let everyone sign these covenants, then we get n to the cube, and we don't want that. So this is a circuit that only the two parties build. So how we prevent them to collude? Well, we have this winner selector that only one of the next links of the chain can take. So basically, three things can happen with this. Either Alice consumes the selector, or Bob consumes the selector, or if none of them consume the selector, then anyone else can apply this dispute timeout transaction and prevent both of them to moving forward. 5 minutes? Okay. So this is how the circuit looks, the transaction DAG looks with 3 rounds. So you see that in that part you see Alice fighting Bob. In this part you see Carol fighting Dave. And when we see here, we see that there are 4 flex components here, but only one of them will be able to get activated. Okay, so we have all the combinations here that are pre-built. A against C, A against D, B against C, and B against D. But because we have these selectors, only one of these components is going to be activated. So that we can ensure that only one of them will move to the next one, okay? So that's the idea. And the number of links in this chain is the logarithmic of the number of operators we have. So it's logarithmic in the operators. This is the flex component I'm using. It's a little bit different from the one that Futo showed because it split providing input from providing deposit. It's better if you first provide the deposit and then provide the input, because then the grinding attack where you provide the input has a cost. So if you provide the input and the deposit simultaneously and the other party does nothing, then you already pay the cost. So it's better if you first provide the input, then the other provide the input, then one provide the deposit, then the other first the deposits and then the input. So it's a slightly different flex component, but it's better, okay? This is the full component. And what I'm showing here is that the flex component ends with a number of time locks, so it always ends in a certain bounded amount of time. So this is how it looks, kind of compressed, the same things that I showed you before of a phase one. You see here the 4 components, flex components for this round, but only one of these will be activated. And this is the chains, okay? So how the second phase looks, okay? So we know that the first phase ends with just one of these winning. So how the second phase looks? Well, the second phase, I added some parts to make sure you understand the context. So we have a peg-in here, this is a bridge. We have a direct transfer, this is a kind of a end-of-end signature that allows the parties to directly transfer to the end user if there's no dispute. But let's say there is dispute, we have this start phase transaction that is connected to the party that won the phase one, okay? And then we have this different tournament of flex components. And one of the properties of the flex 2 component is that it has 2 parameters, which is basically how each one of the parties can be delayed, okay? So what we are going to put is, we are going to put the flex components where allow anyone to fight against Alice. Here I'm assuming Alice is the winner, with different times for Alice to participate. So here, Alice is forced to start at time 0, but here, Alice can start at time 1, and here, Alice can start at time 2. So this gives Alice the time to win money, to earn money, to be used here. What happens is there is some challenges that are missing. Let's say Bob doesn't show up, he doesn't want to challenge, and Dave doesn't want to challenge. Well, no problem. What Alice can do, she can bring any of these flex components forward, because these are only bonds, okay? So he can take, for instance, this fight against Eve, or I don't know, E, and bring it here, and leave these slots empty. So Alice can always reorder these fights so that she fights 1, then 2, then 3 against all potential challengers. Okay? And this, for instance, is an example of a full DAG for 2 phases and 4 parties. I'm showing only here the second phase of one party because it's connected only to Alice that wins here. It has 2, right? Has one where Alice wins the first phase and one where Bob wins the first phase. So it's actually 2 of the 4 phases. And this is all for two parties. So you can see that it's not so complex. It's quite easy. Okay? Yeah. Well, for me it's okay. So just to summarize, what is a battle for? Okay, it's a 2-phase tournament where we recycle the rewards to keep the honest asserted capital constant. Okay. And it resolves any number of challenges in logarithmic time, escalating the schedules. We presented how to do this on Bitcoin. There's 2 papers published. One is the Battle the Abstract, the other is Battle for Bitcoin, where everything is explained. And it uses flex gates, as Futo mentioned. It uses garbled circuits and everything we learned today. It has these 2 phases that I mentioned, and it has this tournament chain just for rate limit the number of assertions that you have to fight. And what is important is that the cost is still n squared for each party. Okay, so it gets practical for near 1,000 operators.
Communication cost.
Yeah, the communication cost is n squared. Yes, it gets yeah. It's also a limit, but it's not a cube, right? And why it's not it's not cube, because as I mentioned, only the two parties involved in a flex dispute sign those transactions. The other are not involved. They don't even need to know that these are fighting against each other. Okay, so that's everything. Thank you very much.